Hi, welcome to the second assessment task 2 explanation. Now I just want to apologize, there is some building works happening here at the Peninsula campus, so it might be a little bit noisy, but hopefully you can hear me. So really this assessment task is an essay, but with a practical part, and I'll explain that as we go. This is worth 50% of your overall score. The due date is the 27th of October, and that's 5 minutes to midnight. Now, the first thing is you need to choose one of the broad topics, and it is very broad, a broad topic from the list on Moodle, and that's in the Assessment Task 2 Guides and Resources. Now, once you've decided on the topic, you need to critically discuss the topic in relation to the country and English language teaching context with which you are most familiar. So you might do it from your home country, the one that you're planning to teach in, whichever it is, you need to identify a country and the English language teaching context. And you need to discuss the topic in light of that context. Then you're going to analyze the topic in light of the practical implications on your teaching context. So how does the knowledge of this topic, so you're going to do a whole kind of review of the topic, looking at what the literature says about this topic. Now, how does it actually impact teaching and learning? And what are the implications of this topic? So if the topic is speaking, what do we know about speaking generally, internationally, about the value of speaking? But then also, how does this, what does the literature say about speaking and how it impacts teaching and learning in your particular context? The other part of this essay is that you're going to reflect on your written task in week 3. So remember you had a task on learning aspirations. And basically this is a reflection. It's not a huge part of your assignment, but what you need to do is think about that written task for week 3 and your online discussions, and discuss how your ideas and beliefs have changed over or developed. So they may not have changed, but they may have developed over the course of the unit. So you need to provide examples from your weekly discussions or your week 3 activity. So this just shows that you've actually you're thinking critically about what you knew then and how maybe that's developed or changed or broadened your ideas. As in the last assessment task, you need to include at least 5 articles or chapters in addition to the prescribed text. But know that probably, in most cases, your list will be quite long. All right, so I'm going to kind of give you some examples of how you might address your topic. So I have 2 different topics here. There's the spread of English as a global language and its implication for classroom teaching. Now, I've kind of highlighted some keywords, so the spread and global language. Now, here's some kind of questions that I would be thinking about if I chose that topic. So what is the history of the spread of English in your country? So you might generally talk about the history of the spread of English across the world, but then specifically, what is the history of the spread of English in your country or the country that you're focusing on? What has been its impact, and what's its impact now? How is English used? And how has the spread of English impacted education? How has it impacted teaching? So we're looking at how has the spread of English impacted education and learning, but how has it actually impacted teaching? So are teachers teaching differently now that English is the main, English as a foreign language or English as a second language? So, and what kinds of, teaching approaches have emerged given the spread of English? Another example is the development of speaking skills. So more generally, how does one develop speaking skills? What are the characteristics of a competent English speaker? What are the components of speaking skills? So we have this concept of communicative competence. What is that? And what do students need to develop communicative competence? How is speaking developed, taught, or learned in your country or the country that you're focusing on? How does this impact today's classroom and the future classroom? So these are some of the things that you might talk about in the development of speaking skills. So I think the key thing is you need to come up with an outline for your essay. And what I would suggest is that you create an outline, and then in our face-to-face tutorials, if you're a face-to-face student, we will kind of look at these outlines and get feedback from peers and from your tutor and so on. If you are online, this is something that you can go ahead and send to me to get some feedback. Now, I'm going to use a topic, it's not in there, but let's say the topic is positive learning environments. So the first section is to really think about the theory behind the topic. So what is the theories or the research surrounding positive learning environments? So here's some things that I might talk about. I might start with talking about, why is positive learning environment important for learning? So why, what do I know? What do the experts say about the value of positive learning environments, and how does this actually impact on learning? I might talk about the characteristics of a positive learning environment. What studies have looked at the characteristics and what has been the impact? How are positive learning environments created in Australia in particular? So this is where I go back to studies that talk about positive learning environments and the impact on learning. Now, I think because this is an essay, you need to have an argument. So I would be starting my essay by talking about having an argument. And the argument I would make is, positive learning environments encourage student learning by giving them a sense of belonging and providing a supportive and safe place to make mistakes and improve. So in my essay, I might kind of talk about positive learning environments, about generally what do I know about it, what do experts say about it. And maybe one of the things that I found is that positive learning environments develop belonging and develop kind of creativity, or students are willing to kind of take more risks in learning. So that might be kind of two of the key things that I look at. So really, I think the idea is thinking about what's your argument and how are you going to talk about this? Now, the next part, and it's kind of a little bit separate, like you'll have your essay and then you'll have a little section for reflection. And I think the key thing to think about here is, what have you learned from the reading or exploring about learning environments, if that's your topic, okay? So, or speaking, that you did not know before. So think about, what have you learned over the course about, your particular topic that you did not know before? And you need to link back to week 3 reflection, or your week 3 activity on your learning aspirations, and or your other weekly posts, okay? So think about, was this something that you said you needed to develop when you were talking about your learning aspirations? Why or why not? Okay, so even if you didn't even mention, maybe you're focusing on speaking, maybe you didn't even mention anything about speaking. Why do you think this is? And why is it now an interesting topic for you? How does this new learning, so the learning that you've done on this topic, in my case, it was learning environments, help you to achieve what you wanted out of this course? So have you learned something new, and how does it help you develop and achieve what you wanted to from this course? And how does this new learning change your perception of your role as a teacher? So as you have kind of looked at this topic, has it changed your idea of your role as a teacher? Now, the last main part of this assignment is the practical side of it. So how can I create a positive learning environment to improve the learning experiences of my English language learners? So what are the practical implications? So it's going to you're going to have maybe a section where you really link the theory and the practice. So now that you know what you know now, how will you approach your future classrooms? So maybe well, this is how you develop speaking. So now you want to really focus on these aspects of developing speaking. So you're going to maybe write a few paragraphs or however many to kind of really create that link between what you've learned about the theory and then the classroom. Now, you might have already done that in the essay, so then you don't need to really repeat it here in this practical section. But there is a part of the rubric that talks about, have you made the link between all that learning about the theory of speaking, for example, or the spread of English, and then your classroom? Have you made that link? And then what you're going to do is you're going to design or discuss some activities or strategies, and there's some examples in the assessment task 2 guides and resource folder. Now, I've said 3 to 5, but actually I would just focus on 3 and give them a bit of time to kind of really look at them. So you're not only going to talk about what they're going to do, you're going to talk about what level of students it's focusing on, what is really the objective. Now, it's not the whole lesson plan, you're not doing a whole lesson plan, but you need to explain why you're using these. And this is where you're linking it back to the theory. Why are these activities going to help you address speaking development? Or why are these activities going to address some of the issues that you'd mentioned about the spread of English? Okay, so again, this will link to your topic that you've chosen. So focus on 3 and be really detailed, and not only what you would do, so the procedure and why you're doing it and for that particular group, but what the connection is between the theory. And there is a section that you need to talk about the communicative aims. So how, through these activities, can you encourage positive interactions and maximize English language interactions in your classroom? So I'm just going to go over the rubric a little bit. So you need to, the first section is a strong rationale for the topic is provided and discusses how this topic relates to your particular teaching context. And this is why this is where you're really focusing on why this topic is important or why this topic is relevant to your teaching context. So if you are talking about Indonesia, you need to really talk about why this topic of speaking or why this topic of reading is really important for an Indonesian context, okay? So give a strong rationale of how this topic, the topic that you've decided to look at, relates to your teaching context and how you can learn from that. The second criteria is looking at a clear argument. So what are you trying to argue, and is it supported by the literature? So this is really the real meat of that essay. So have you had a clear argument? So in the case of the positive learning environments, I wanted to talk about maybe, you know, what is a positive learning environment, what is its impact on learning globally, and then more specifically Australia, and then how it can develop belonging and safety and risks, or maybe taking risks or whatever. So, and then I've supported this by literature throughout the whole process. So this is a real proper essay. Then there's the reflection section, where you're talking about how your ideas have developed, or you know, your thinking has developed over the course of this unit, particularly in the topic of, in relation to your topic. Now this isn't a huge section, but you do need to address this. Then there's the practical section, where you're making links between the theory and the practice, and the activities are appropriate for the topic. So if you've talked about speaking and about how the importance of developing speaking, and you're mostly doing activities that are focusing on, you know, the teacher telling students how to speak and not actually giving them opportunities to speak, then that might not be a strong link between theory and practice. So you need to actually have practical activities that actually relate to the arguments that you made in your topic. So if it's activities that focus primarily on grammar, when you've talked about that, you know, to develop speaking, you really need to provide opportunities for fluency, then that's not a really strong link. And then the idea is that they're actually well designed. Now, again, you're not doing a whole lesson plan on these, but you do need to make sure that you're doing things that are appropriate for a level. So you need to identify what is the level of the students. Are they, you know, year 3 students? Are they high school students? Are they university students? And then it needs to be appropriate for that. So if you're singing, you know, Old MacDonald Had a Farm at a university setting, it may not be as authentic or appropriate for that particular context. And then you also need to mention about the communicative aims. So, you know, how are you actually encouraging communication and interaction? So this is really the development of those key activities. And then the final thing, sorry about the small writing, but this is really just talking about, like the last rubric, about the language, so the spelling. And not everybody's perfect, and we don't expect you to have perfect language skills, but it will, you know, particularly, like you might have a lot of errors, but the meaning is clear, then you're going to get a C, because that means you're doing what you need to do. But, you know, meaning does need to be clear. And then the last section is really looking at your use of literature, not so much your use, but your academic formatting of that. So are your ideas clear? Does it have a good flow? Do you have topic sentences? You know, have you supported your ideas? And particularly your reference list and your in-text citations, are those used appropriately using APA? So here's a little guide. I hope this is helpful. I would encourage you to identify a topic that you want to look at and create an outline, and then get feedback on that outline so you can move forward. All right, have a lovely day.